I don't think I've gotten my cheeks clapped in a game as hard as I have in Armored Core 6, but also had as much fun as I've had in Armored Core 6. I knew the kings of Souls-like from Software were behind Armored Core. They've dropped masterpieces like Bloodborne, Sekiro, and last year's Game of the Year, Elden Ring. But they said this game wasn't a Souls-like, so I assumed it wasn't gonna be hard. I was terribly wrong. Now, I'm not the best at games. I'm not the guy who does crazy challenges or beats that infamous boss in 2 tries. In fact, I'm usually struggling. But if a game can manage to be fun even while you're losing, that's a major win, right? Hello world and all who inhabit it, it is I, the Great Sayran, and full transparency, I have spent the majority of my playtime in Armored Core 6 on Balteus, the Chapter 1 boss. I'll get into why that happened later, but I wanted you guys to know that this isn't a review like normal. I totally recommend this game to anyone who enjoys shooters, mechs, customizations, and high quality gaming. But that isn't what this video is about. It's about Armored Core 6's difficulty, its addictive ability to get you to try one more run, and other pros and cons I've experienced so far in this game. Before we get started, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe because it'll make me happy, and I think I deserve happiness. Armored Core actually is a storied franchise that has multiple entries. I mean, that's where the 6 comes from. These older entries never really reviewed well, and that was reflected in their sales. FromSoft then went on to make some of the best the Souls-like genre has to offer, and so Bandai decided to give them actual resources to create one more Armored Core. Since launch, it has become the 5th highest peak concurrent player count game of 2023, and 2nd highest FromSoft launch of all time. So again, this game is good, and I don't need to tell you that. But what makes it good? Well, it's not just one thing, it's a combination. For starters, the combat and specifically the movement is really good. I didn't think of myself as a mech game guy, even though Titanfall 2 is one of my favorite games of all time. Armored Core feels like it unlocked a whole new genre of gaming for me to explore and fall in love with. I have so many positive things to say about my experience, and even though there are a few negatives, this has to be one of the most fun action RPGs I've ever played. This is an action RPG, right? Let me know down below. I knew Armored Core 6 was amazing when I entered the first mission and tilted my left thumbstick. The movement in this game is so smooth. Your mechs are very responsive, and you can even create builds that focus on this agility. It may be the difference of you spending an hour on a boss or 30 minutes. More on that later. The movement in this game mimics how rockets would propel in real life. There are no hard stops because that's just not how momentum works. It can be frustrating when you go slightly further past cover than you wanted and get hit, but it also pushes you to spend more time with your build so you're comfortable with how your build moves. Combat has options. You can equip SMGs, swords, lasers, rockets, bazookas, and so much more. I landed on a pretty safe build of SMG in my right hand, sword in my left hand, and dual plasma missiles with lock on to clear the path when I'm reloading. This is usually the build I use 99% of the time, and it's not until bosses where I have to get a bit more creative. These weapons for me work best on a mech I can skirt around with and do big damage quickly. I always say this, but games that can fit your playstyle are the best types of games. I asked people on Twitter, or X, how they beat Balteus, and the responses were pretty varied. One of the main common things I saw people say was that they were aggressive and stayed on the boss, but the different ways they did that, either with class cannon builds, balance builds, long range builds, or tank builds, was refreshing to see. There may be people telling you how to defeat an enemy, but it's still up to you to find the best build that fits your playstyle. Like I mentioned, I enjoy having a sword in my back pocket to get in some well-timed hits and an automatic weapon to spray and get that stagger meter up. Even though the original build I was mimicking had different weapons, I was able to adjust to me and still eke out a win against a pretty difficult boss. That's a huge pro in my book. Aside from really smooth controls and fun mechanics, there's also a great artistic design, from how everything sounds to how beautifully this game is shot. The opening you see right before you take control of your mech is absolutely gorgeous. This is a cross-gen game, but on my PS5, you'd think it was an exclusive. The lighting hits just right, especially if you go customize your mech's look and give a slight shine to them like I did. Online, people are recreating some of the most infamous mechs in media, and it's cool because you can also share these designs with specific codes that people can use in the design option. From Gundam to Code Geass, there is a lot of homage paid online by creatives, and the coolest part is that this isn't DLC or paywall like most skins like this would be in the modern era of gaming. The sound design is amazing, from your bullets being shot to your plasma sword striking enemies to the faint thrust you give when you jump from place to place. It's also immersive and almost serene, even though you're obliterating hundreds of mechs through this playthrough. The level design is just fantastic. Some are objective based, like gathering intel for your next mission, and some just want you to defeat whichever enemies are present and move on. They give out ranks for each level completed, and though it's not necessarily hard to do, chasing all S ranks will probably take you 30+ hours. The levels themselves are short, about a minute to minute and a half, and they're not recycling them over and over again. Every mission is unique with some few similarities, but they just fit the theme of the story and what's happening on Rubicon, which, spoiler alert, is a lot. The performance is also a joy. If I'm going to be killed by a boss over and over and over again, I want it to be at a stable 60 FPS at least. Higher frame rates for precision gameplay like this are necessary. If this game was locked at 30, I'd probably get motion sick as I zip around the screen trying to land hits in perfect openings. My personal favorite thing to do in between these missions is go to the arena and 1v1 against different builds the game throws at you. Initially, I thought I wouldn't do well, but honestly, these fights are a bit easier than they need to be. It kind of fits into the idea that this game has random and unfair difficulty spikes. Why am I able to fight an E-rank mech and finish them off in 40 seconds, but be stuck on Sea Spider for an hour and a half? I get that these mechs have different health, stats, specs, etc., but it can be a bit jarring that I do well in the part of the game with no heals and a cage match, but be stuck on a boss midway through a chapter. It can seem unforgiving, but all these pros are what keeps me glued to the experience, just like the cons push me away and make me want to say that was cool, but never again. No game is perfect, but imperfections shouldn't be as divisive as Armored Core 6's. We'll leave it for the end, but there are other cons I've observed that to me are just as bad or even worse than the matter of difficulty in this game, mainly camera and aiming. Someone told me that the manual aim OST you can equip on your build helps with this, but it just feels like lock-on is non-existent. Our mechs are moving fast and I often lose track of enemies or get stuck under them and then get berated with attacks and ultimately lose. It seems to only be with larger enemies, but that's most of the bosses, so this still needs to be fixed. Speaking of bosses, the difficulty spike when you get to them can be a bit much. I'm slicing and dicing through your level, then get stuck on your boss for 30+ minutes. Why? Of course, you mitigate this by going to the garage and adjusting your assembly and which mech you want to retry with, but even then, it feels like there's minimal guidance as to what you need to defeat whichever enemy. I stated this as a pro earlier, but now I'm stating it as a con. It really depends on the player, and though I recommend this to anyone, even those who don't like harder games, I have to warn people that they need to be willing to experiment as much as possible. Also, running out of ammo is annoying. I get why it runs out, and I don't even mind the mechanic, but it feels like these guns need about 10% more ammo. I ran out of ammo before health with Balteus several times. That's partially why I used the sword, since it had more manageable ammo than the double SMGs I was recommended. The difficulty in general is fine. I appreciate a challenge, and allowing the player to experience the game fully via difficulty is just FromSoft style. It hits until it doesn't. Again, I'm trash, but I spent hours on Balteus and other bosses. I have friends who brag they beat them in 2 tries and this game is too easy, and I think that's cool. We have 2 completely different experiences with the same game and both are enjoying the ride. That's amazing, but for the less talented like me, it can feel like torture. We play games to escape reality. We don't necessarily want to get beat up in real life and in games too. I think the difficulty hits for some, is non-existent for others, and an impossibility for the rest. That doesn't mean this isn't a great game with great experiences to offer. I'm not requesting difficulty options like some are, though they couldn't hurt. I'm just here to say that this game hits even through the difficulty, which is meant to be a feature, not a bug. But I understand those of you who say it doesn't, and that it is an issue, and that you can't enjoy this game as much as you had hoped. For a game you can enjoy fairly easily, check out my review of Atlas Fallen. It's surprisingly good. Also, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all the good stuff, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.